Good afternoon, and welcome to our program on who wrote this, the judge or a machine. My name is Frank Bailey. I'm the president of the Pioneer New England Legal Foundation, and I'll just start with I want to introduce the troops that will be presenting today. Welcome to everyone who's joining online. Welcome to everyone who's going to watch this later when it's recorded, and welcome to everyone who has appeared here today. Thank you for joining us. The two dates that I want to put onto your calendar that will be coming up are in September. We just after Labor Day, we'll be having a presentation about the Stewart Hospital case, a really transformative healthcare bankruptcy, and we will have the principals at our program. That will be up the street at the Sullivan Worcester law firm. And then on December 6th, we'll have our annual Brackett Deniston Rule of Law lecture. Danielle Sassoon from the Southern District of New York is our speaker at that event. So mark your calendars, and hopefully we'll see you at those two events. But let me get right to it and say that we've had a terrific group of interns this summer, law school interns from here and in Europe, and a college intern who was really the person who was behind most of this. So let me just introduce them very quickly, and then we'll launch to them. So Lucy Kabrhel. No, Kabrhel. Kabrhel. I'm sorry. I'll never get it till you leave.
No worries.
So Lucy is a rising sophomore at UNC Chapel Hill. And is considering law school. We haven't talked her out of it this summer, but she's been a great help to us this summer. Jenna Smyth is with us from the University of Galway, Ireland, where she just graduated from the law school. I had the privilege of teaching some there this past spring, and Jenna is next on her way to the Supreme Court in Ireland as a judicial assistant. We might think of it as a law clerk. So congratulations to Jenna. Tom Lane is a rising 2L at Boston College Law School via Fairfield, and Michael Champigny. Is that okay?
It's okay.
Champigny. All right. From now on, it's a lot. We only hire O'Neills and Baileys from now on. So Michael is a rising 2L really at Suffolk Law School in the evening program, and spends his days over at the Edward Kennedy Senate
Institute for
the U.S. Senate. And so we're very proud to have had him join us this summer. So let me launch it then to who's first? Lucy?
Right here.
Actually. Okay, Michael, go right ahead.
All right. So if we could turn to the next slide.
There's a note here. It says clicker's dead or something.
All right. Yeah. So no clicker, folks. So we'll just have to.
We'll indicate.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
John is going to do it. John will do it. All right.
All right. Thank you, Judge Bailey, and thank you everybody for being here today. Whether you're in person or attending virtually, we're very excited to share this presentation with you, and we hope you enjoy it. I wanted to start by just giving a quick overview of what we'll cover in the presentation today. So we'll start with some background information and current events related to artificial intelligence in the legal community. We'll then transition to some AI-generated legal documents made by our very own Lucy using ChatGPT and Claude, different AI platforms, and we'll see whether the latest AI detection technology could tell what was generated by artificial intelligence versus what was written by humans. We'll then turn over to an entirely AI-generated case where we generated different documents with legal-specific AI platforms. which we'll go into more later, and we'll see whether the AI detection technology could tell whether those documents were AI generated. We'll then think about AI policy in higher education to consider how our universities and law schools are preparing the next generation, if at all, to use this technology in the workplace. And we'll conclude by turning it back over to Judge Bailey, who's going to speak about AI and judicial ethics.
Right, so now we're going to take a look at the background that has sort of shaped how AI has impacted the law thus far, and how it's already begun to impact people in the legal profession. So I think it's no secret that over the past 3 years or so, generative AI has really stormed onto the scene in the public consciousness. ChatGPT, which I think we'll use as a sort of shorthand for generative AI, really has captured the imaginations of a lot of people across the world, and in the law since it came on the scene in, I believe, November of 2022. And I don't think it's so unusual for people to wonder just how this has already begun to shape the law and will continue to do so going forward. So this really is a very prescient topic at the moment. And I'd like to cite just a couple of very recent examples of how generative AI has really not been in the news for very good reasons regarding the law. This in particular is a case out of the U.S. District Court, Federal District Court for the District of New Jersey. Judge Niels there was compelled to withdraw an opinion after one of the partners at Wilkie Farr pointed out that his opinion contained multiple instances of what we will call hallucinated cases. That is, cases that appear to be real, but in fact don't cite to anything because they've been created by large language models like ChatGPT. We still don't know the full story there, but it is somewhat troubling, in particular because this particular opinion had already been relied upon in multiple instances by other courts as supplemental authority at the time that it was withdrawn just in the past 2 weeks. And in another case, a state trial court down in Georgia, the Court of Appeals in Georgia has just levied a fine on an attorney after the attorney's appellee brief wound up being relied upon by a judge in that trial level court, once again containing fictitious cases, hallucinated cases. So it really is somewhat troubling to see just how these cases are making it past not just attorneys. It may begin with an attorney who files something in a brief, but it's fairly easy to see how this can slip past even the most trained legal minds. Judges are not exempt.
Thank you, Tom. And now we're gonna, with that background in mind, get into the meat of our project here today. So as Tom mentioned, it's easy for some of these, hallucinated cases, for example, to get past even trained legal minds. So we were curious, the latest AI detection software, could it tell what is artificially generated versus what was written by a human? How we're about to explore this is we're going to look through a few different documents generated using AI and compare them across multiple different AI detection softwares whose purpose is to tell whether something is artificially generated. We're going to compare those to documents written by humans. Then, as I briefly touched on earlier, we'll look at some different AI policies at various universities throughout the country and a few law schools right here in Boston to see how those schools are preparing the next generation of professionals to use this technology. Ultimately, we believe this project shows that legal professionals must engage critically with AI to ensure it ensure it enhances rather than undermines the integrity of the justice system.
All right, now I'm going to take us through some of our AI-generated legal documents and our AI detection. We decided to choose two of the most widely used AI generators, which are ChatGPT, which I'm sure you've all heard of, and another similar generator called Claude. We also compared them with 5 of the most widely used AI detectors. These include CopyLeaks, GPT-0, Winston, Grammarly, and Quillbot. We tested on some human documents and some artificial documents, and also some documents that were partially generated by AI, integrated with some human content as well. I'm going to show you how to read these charts now. The ones that say GPT-0 or GPT 100% and Claude 100% are fully AI-generated documents. The ones that say GPT-2 and Claude 2 are the same AI documents as above, but the AI has been prompted to make the text sound more human. GPT-3 and Claude 3 are similar, but the AI has been told to make it sound even more human in an attempt to bypass the AI detectors. And then finally, we have H60, H80, and H100%, which are 60%, 80%, and 100% human. The remaining percentage has been written and edited using AI. Finally, the results of these tables are measured in percentage of human writing detected. So a higher percentage in an AI written document is not a good thing. All right, the first document that we chose to test was a stipulation of dismissal. This is an example on the screen. Now, I don't expect you to be able to read this. It's just so you can see the formatting, but this has been generated by ChatGPT using a model of a real stipulation of dismissal. So basically what we did is we entered a real stipulation of dismissal and then told ChatGPT to rewrite it, maintaining only the factual information. The rest is entirely AI generated. Now you may be able to see that this looks pretty similar to a real stipulation of dismissal. The AI is able to take the formatting and some of the content and recreate it. So we're going to look at a couple of these different variations of AI generated documents and compare them to our detectors in the next slide. All right, on the left-hand side in blue, we have our 5 detectors, copy leaks, all the way down to Quillbot. And then on the top, we have our different variations of AI and human generated documents. Again, I'd like to remind you that the results are measured in percentage of human writing. I would like to direct your attention all the way over to the right under the H100% column. It's okay, it won't work. As we can see, we have pretty high numbers here, which is a good thing. These detectors correctly identified a human written document as human. So this is avoiding false positives. However, if I direct your attention to the left-hand side under the GPT 100% column, you can also see some equally high numbers, especially with Quillbot and Grammarly and Winston. This means that the detectors falsely identified the document as human when it was in fact 100% written by AI. However, a stipulation of dismissal, as I'm sure you all know, is not a long document. The majority of the text is addresses, names, and pretty brief information. The way that these AI detectors work is they take a text and they flag certain phrases and words and even diction and orders of sentences, everything. And they flag it. So a document with a short amount of text is going to be much more difficult to identify as AI. Hence, much of these very high numbers. But if we move into our next one, we'll see why this is much more difficult to detect a short document than it is a long one.
Lucy, just a quick question. The AI detectors, you've got 5 of them listed here.
Yes.
These are like commercially available, right?
Oh, yes.
And-
Most of them are available with a subscription. Copy leaks, GPT-0, Winston all have a paid subscription and for an upgraded, but you can access a certain amount of free credits, so anyone could use these. However, I'd also like to point out that given that they're online and available to the public, they're not necessarily the most secure thing to be used in a court unless there's a lot of protection and against hacking, theft, anything. So you'd have to really integrate it properly. Okay, we can move on to the second document that we chose was a sample of an amicus brief. This one here is also generated by ChatGPT. Again, I don't expect you to read it, but just viewing the formatting, it's not horrible compared to an original. This was done by taking a sample of a real amicus brief, putting it into the AI and prompting the AI to entirely reword it. As you can see, there are a couple citations, and these citations are the same ones that were mentioned in the original, so the AI did not modify them. However, we didn't really give it any room to hallucinate because there were already citations included in the original text.
What was your prompt on this?
The prompt, well, I uploaded my sample and I said, rewrite this, maintaining the original factual information, 100% rewrite. So the most of the text, and you can see these documents in the packets, but it still maintains a legal tone. This is ChatGPT, however, and some of the other AI generators that we're going to look at don't do as well with the tone. We can look at how they perform in the next slide in the charts. Again, on the left, we have our detectors, and across the top, we have our various types of documents. As you can see in the top row of copy leaks, there are several 0%. This is a good thing. This means that this AI detector correctly identified all of those documents as AI. However, down in Quillbot and Grammarly, you can see some higher numbers. They're clearly not very good detectors. But again, on the left-hand column, GPT 100%, we've got a good variety. So what we did is we ended up using copy leaks and GPT-0 for our next analysis, which Michael will take you through.
So, as Lucy explained, we were very curious to see whether or not the generative AI was capable of adapting itself in order to bypass the AI detectors. So the first paragraph you'll see here on the left is a sample from the 100% ChatGPT generated amicus brief. So as you can see, the language, it is formal, it is professional, the grammar is correct, and it's not completely a reach to see how a layperson could look at that and say, okay, that's the same format that is matching a real amicus brief. However, through the eyes of a legal professional, you could say it reads a bit more similar to prose from an English writing class than an actual legal document, and it lacks the accuracy and the conciseness of a professional trained in legal writing. So what we wanted to see is whether or not, and to be clear, this got a 0% rating from the AI detector, so they could see it was AI generated. But we wanted to see whether or not we could prompt the AI generator to improve upon itself, to outsmart, for want of a better word, the AI detector. So we asked it to appear more human, and we generated the, I'm so sorry, this is actually the wrong slide, John. This is, yeah, this one, sorry. Here you have here, this is the kind of, it's a bit wordy, it's a bit more similar to prose. And we asked for it to appear more human to outsmart the detector. And we got the sample on the right, which I would encourage you to take a quick read of and see whether or not a judge could pick that out as perhaps not written by a trained attorney. But what is interesting is that this sample on the right, when rerun to an AI detector, received a score of 96% human written, which was the same as the genuine amicus brief that had previously been submitted, written by PNELF in courts previously. So the point we're making here really, and what this proves, is that the AI, neither the generators or the detectors are perfect. Both of them considered more human writing to be less professional, more lax. And while an AI detector would tell you that the sample on the right was 96% human written, of course, any judge would still immediately flag that. And you can move on. Thank you, John. But then, of course, it's all about the prompt, as Lucy mentioned previously. So what we've done here is we took the same more human sample from the previous slide, but this time, instead of prompting it to sound more human, we prompted it to sound as if it was written by a lawyer for submission in court. And it generated on the right. Now, generated on the right is already a marked improvement even from the original ChatGPT generated amicus brief. It is more concise, it flows more like an argument, it's not written like a story, less fluff, for want of a better word. And the 2 sentences I highlighted in yellow were particularly marked when we ran it through the AI detector as the most likely to be written by a human. So the piece on the right got a 52% human writing score, which is far from perfect, but the 2 sentences that were marked as most human were the ones that contained legalese, such as plaintiffs, and the ones that contained this completely AI generated site. Now it's correct in this particular instance, it is the correct federal rule of procedure, but it was created by ChatGPT and put there. So the point is, it could take this and it could make a more reasonably legal sounding amicus brief when prompted to sound like a lawyer for court. However, of course, ghost sites become more and more likely as cases get more complex. Rule 23A is widely known and pretty broadly available for numerosity requirements. But when you get more deep into cases, it's more likely that ChatGPT will ghost site and completely make things up. Yeah, sorry.
So we're now going to jump into an entirely AI generated case. And what we switched up here is that while in the previous section, we were using documents generated by ChatGPT, for instance, which is made for general use. With this case, we wanted to test legal AI platforms. So I want to just test the temperature around the room. Could I get a raised hand? Is anyone familiar with CoCounsel, Westlaw's AI platform? Okay, a few people. How about Protege, Lex's AI platform? Couple. Okay, but not a lot of people. So we want to.
I'm the only one with gray hair that raised his hand. So. Okay, go ahead, Gal.
We wanted to see whether these platforms, which are specifically made to create things for lawyers and law students, whether they would perform better or worse than ChatGPT, for instance, which is just made for general use. We go to the next slide. So I want to start by telling you some brief facts of the case, and these facts are actually the prompt that Lucy used to create the complaint for our case. So here's what our case is about. We asked all of these AI platforms to generate a legal complaint from the attorney Frank Bailey at Pioneer New England Legal Foundation. The complaint is against a former IT director named John the Liberté, who has violated his 5-year non-compete agreement in New England by going to work for the Connecticut Freedom Coalition. He left PNELF immediately, and there's evidence that he is using the proprietary case management software developed at PNELF at CFC. However, John is working for CFC from abroad in Ireland. We want to sue him in the Irish High Court. The address for PNELF is 185 Devonshire Street, Boston. So there's just a general overview of this case. And again, this is exactly what Lucy put into Protege, CoCounsel, and we also did this with ChatGPT as sort of a control to create the complaint. So here, for everyone viewing online, the complaint is up on the slide here. This is CoCounsel's. For everyone in person, right in your packets here, should be right on the 3rd page. There's a cover page for complaints, and then you'll have the ChatGPT complaint first. Then the CoCounsel complaint. And last but not least, the Protege complaint. I want to give everyone 30 seconds just to glance over those quickly before we jump into the next portion.
So, Lucy, Jenna, you're familiar with pleadings in Ireland. Do they look genuine to you? Are they, other than maybe formatting?
The formatting is off, and also what we will note is so CoCounsel and Protege are geared towards US law, and the wording we did use was complaint. So for this part, it's far more similar to the States, and there were some interesting anomalies in there. We had the jurisdiction of New England. We also had the High Court of Massachusetts appeared by Westlaw's CoCounsel, which is a bit disturbing. But when we get on later to the opinion generated part, it matched more similarly to the actual Irish court. But this part, not really at all, to be honest.
And I was going to mention, personally, I may be only a rising 2L, but I definitely wouldn't recommend any attorneys submit this to court. However, you can imagine how, say, a pro se litigant may jump on here, create this, and it probably is a lot better than what they've come up with on their own, paper and pencil. So there's our complaint. And again, we're looking at all of these because we're about to see whether the AI detectors could tell that these documents were generated entirely using artificial intelligence. And if we go to the next slide, we'll imagine in our fake case that after Judge Bailey filed his complaint, defendant La Liberté filed a timely motion to dismiss. Unfortunately for him, he generated that motion to dismiss using artificial intelligence. So you can see in your packets, if you just turn to the next section, the motion to dismiss, and I'll give you another minute just to look that over briefly before we talk over another table, showing whether the detectors could tell that these documents were not written by a human being. And just for the sake of time, I'm going to move on to the table on the next slide, but everybody in person can keep all of these documents to review later, and everybody watching virtually will make sure to share these along with the whole presentation. So could the AI detectors tell whether these documents are AI generated? Apologies to anyone online who can't see me. I'm just going to stand up to review the table to make it a little bit easier. As you can see in this table here, we took from the section Lucy just described only the two best AI detectors, CopyLeaks and GPT-0. They were the best because they could most correctly tell which documents were generated by AI versus written by a human. Again, results are measured in percentage of human writing detected. So a 0 would mean that the detector believes that document was generated completely by artificial intelligence. A human being did not write any of it, whereas a 100 would mean that a human wrote this entire document. It was created by a person. Looking over the results here, we can see it's sort of interesting. Co-counsel, Westlaw's AI platform, performed the most poorly. Or in this case, the detectors identified it correctly that these were AI generated documents, right? It was not written by a human. So it said 1% here, for instance, for the co-counsel complaint, whereas Protege, Lexis's AI platform, performed quite well. Assume that 60% of the complaint was likely written by a human being. For CopyLeaks on the top there, and for GPT-0, it thought 87% of that document was written by a human being. ChatGPT even performed a little bit better, at least on the GPT-0 detector than co-counsel. But overall, they could tell largely that these were, they had a hard time telling whether these documents were generated by artificial intelligence or written by a human being. Now we're gonna move to the next slide, where we're gonna look at some evidence for our case, which may have not been made by a human.
All right, I get the fun job. And apologies, John, in advance. All right, so Exhibit 1. This is an image from a PR photo shoot of Mr. La Liberté upon his move to Connecticut Freedom Coalition, which is not a real law firm. Don't look it up. As we can see, he's standing in front of the sign, so clearly he's violated his non-compete, right? Anyway, this photo came from a photo that was taken in this very room. Next, we can see a photo, sorry, John, of Mr. La Liberté shaking hands with President Donald Trump. This is taken as Trump congratulates John on his recent move to CFC. Next, we have a work visa from Ireland, which Jenna can verify does indeed look real. That proves that he's residing in Ireland and chose to depart in August of 2024, as can be seen at the top of the visa, shortly after he left Pioneer. And finally, we have an email from Mr. La Liberté to Mark Bryant, the made-up president of Connecticut Freedom Coalition. In this message, if you read it, I'll give you a moment to read, but he suggests that he's going to install the IT management suite developed at Pioneer at CFC. I'll give you a moment to read this email. All right, now I'd like to also show you the original images, which I used to generate all of these fake documents. Again, on the right, this was taken in this exact office over here about a week ago. And oh, can we go back? Yes, and this is the Irish work visa of a man named Gurjeet Singh, which was found on Google. So as you can see, it's not very difficult to generate some fake evidence, which I was surprised by, and I was especially surprised when I walked into work and my boss asked me to fabricate evidence, but here we are. All right, we can move on. And this
just a quick question.
Yes.
If you're not, I think you might get to this, but maybe not. What software did you use to generate this fake evidence?
Mostly Pixel Cut. Pixel Cut, we had a paid subscription for, and I was able to enter that original photo of John and change the background, add Donald Trump. Also, one thing that was interesting about this, that I found interesting particularly, was that I did not have to describe anything about Donald Trump. Not even his characteristic red tie or the American flag pin. It knew how to do all of that. All I had to do was provide a name. And then I also used it to change the color of, well, I guess it's not in this photo, but if you go back to to the visa slide, 2 above, you can see the color of
one more month. Yeah.
That was down. It's all right. The color of John's shirt was pink. Yes, this photo was taken from before I made that change. But in the AI image detector, which is isgen.ai, I'm not sure. It claims to be the most accurate. Clearly, it's not. It identified this as 100% human. And again, I'm 19 years old. This is made from a Google image and an image taken in this office, and it did not take too much effort. So it's a little bit frightening that this could happen in court, but it's something we all need to be aware of in the future.
Meaning 100% human, it's authentic, is what it's telling you.
This AI detector is saying that that document is authentic. It's only detecting, this is a detector that's for images, not specific government documents, so perhaps the Irish government has something better. But if someone submitted a scan of their visa in court, it could well be fake.
And just to quickly say, so a lot of people we showed the Irish visa to said, well, we automatically know that's AI because they spelled visa with an O, so clearly it's fake. I will just say that's just the Irish language. So that is really, I was shocked at how good of a job it did of doing it. But yeah, just to flag that is how we spell visa on our official documents.
All right, we can.
Okay, so thanks to all of the very compelling evidence against John, gathered or generated by Lucy, we were successfully able to have our case heard for applicable jurisdiction in front of the Irish High Court. So what we did at this point is we asked all three previously mentioned
High court is like our superior
yeah,
trial.
yeah. So it's the Court of First Instance, and then we have a Court of Appeal and a Supreme Court, and that's just nationwide. So yeah, it's the Court of First Instance for anything like this. So we went and we asked all three, so Westlaw's co-counsel, Lexis's protege, and again ChatGPT, to generate more documents. But this time we asked them to generate a judgment, which is an opinion by an Irish judge. So we asked it first, each of them to generate an Irish judgment on our case about whether or not we have jurisdiction in Ireland to sue John in front of the Irish court. And then as a control, we also asked it to generate a US opinion of the same thing, mostly because we're aware of the fact both legal platforms, co-counsel and protege, are geared towards US law, and also because we felt it would be more similar or familiar to everybody in the room. Then what I would say, and all of these are in your booklet again, we've got the Irish judgments and the Irish opinions, of the US opinions. Speaking for the Irish judgments, ChatGPT was by far and away the most accurate. To be honest, when Lucy showed it to me, I was shocked that she hadn't given it more of a prompt to generate it. It matched the form of our documents. It identified the two leading cases for jurisdiction in Ireland and correctly cited them. There was no ghost site in this instance. And generally looking at it was pretty compelling, considering it was claiming to be written by a judge. Both co-counsel and protege, they market themselves as legal drafting tools, struggled considerably more. We are aware that they have a bit more of a limited jurisdictional scope, but both platforms do have access to Irish law, and we use them in Ireland as well. So surprisingly here, ChatGPT was by far the most accurate, as it was able to recognize we were in a different jurisdiction. Co-counsel was also able to recognize that we were taking this to a different jurisdiction and could understand the basis that this should be dismissed, but their legal analysis was next to zero and no case law of any kind was attempted to be used. Protege got really confused and thought we were trying to claim Massachusetts had no jurisdiction versus Connecticut and cited Massachusetts law to prove that. So whatever it did was completely off kilter. I'm just going on then to the next slide. So after we got all 6 of these documents generated, and I told you we looked at them for ourselves, the human analysis, as I talked about on the previous slide, we then wanted to see how the AI detectors would analyze them. So again, we ran it through copy leaks and GPT-0. So firstly, again, as Michael identified for documents generated to be presented to a court, when it came to documents generated allegedly by a judge, co-counsel immediately was flagged as 0% human written in almost every instance. So clearly, despite being a alleged legal drafting tool, it's a far cry from actually being able to replicate something that a judge could write. As I said, the 2 documents that performed the best were the ChatGPT judgment here, the Irish judgment. And again, the ChatGPT opinion, at least for GPT-0, was pretty successful as well. But what I identified as being the most real looking of them was also identified by both CopyLeaks and ChatGPT 0 as the most likely to be human generated.
Which one was that?
This was the ChatGPT Irish judgment, the
Oh.
one right here. And as I said, again, as I mentioned earlier, the more when they ghost cite or when they use legalese, the detectors will assume that they are human generated. They can't actually go behind it. So because ChatGPT did that for the Irish judgment, immediately you get really high results here. But overall, if you look at them, ChatGPT 0 clearly was less able to detect when it came to legal writing or an opinion allegedly written by a judge, able to detect whether or not it was AI than the CopyLeaks. Thanks, John.
Oh yeah, go ahead, of course. If you look just on the first page of your judgments in the packet, I apologize to those of you who are online. You can identify a couple errors. Even with ChatGPT, which was the most accurate according to Jenna and both the detectors, you can see that when I prompted it with what I told, which was create a judgment, I used the correct Irish spelling, which includes an E. And I also mentioned that we were in Ireland. But even ChatGPT, the most accurate of these documents, spelled judgment the American way. This is because these AI generators are mostly trained on American documents. So this machine learning takes inputs from American generated or American human documents and creates its own products, which just leaves some room for error. So even with a pretty accurate document, a attentive human could scan this and flag a couple errors and maybe notice that it was AI.
And just on Lucy's point as well, if you look at the two sides, so the first three columns here are all American opinions, and the second three are the Irish judgments. And generally, the AI detectors gave the Irish judgments a higher degree of human writing. So as Lucy is saying, they will have seen far more American opinions than they will have Irish judgments. So they seem more confident to say that they're AI written than they did when it came to the judgments, which we also is noticeable from it as well.
So they were fooled by the Irish judgments more than they were by.
Which is probably down to familiarity. Familiarity and the fact that in the generated Irish judgments, they did use a lot of legalese and a lot of citation, which generally seems to fool the actual detectives because they can't look behind it, they just see it. Done. Okay, so then we just took a look at so we've gone into detail on the rise of AI and how it's coming to more prevalence, and we just took a look at how academic institutions are responding to that.
Because academic institutions are way ahead of the law and most other fields, correct?
It seems so, yeah, at least. So this particular, the information here, we took a look at, so these are for undergraduate courses. So we went with 2 private universities and 2 public, just for sake of completeness. And ultimately, for the professors, this is in the States, for ultimately, it's up to each professor, the degree and approach they'll take to generative AI used within their classrooms. But this is the policy we found overall that's most resounding across the top universities. So first of all, when AI has been used in research, it has to be cited. AI cannot be used to generate assignments that are submitted to professors. That's assignments in their entirety. It's generally acceptable to most professors that it's used for briefing or research. And then if using AI for research or investigation, you have to fact check it. And of course, don't submit any confidential information to AI. The approach taken by American undergraduate courses, but I would just like to note that it's quite far behind our approach in Europe. So in the UK and in Ireland and in the EU, every submission by any student, any course, not just law, but law is particularly stringent, is automatically run through an AI and a plagiarism detector. And any kind of flag is immediately requires a meeting with the university academic integrity advisor and your professor. So we take it really, really seriously on the other side of the pond. And I think what you see, the rules are much more lax, but developing over in the States from what we've seen.
And Jenna, one other point, just to circle back to what Judge Bailey was saying, I think a reason why, or as Jenna said, even higher education institutions, which have clear policies set out, and we're about to go into some law school examples, they're a bit further ahead than the legal community. And I think a big reason for that is that the problem has been more relevant to them. As we saw with what Tom showed us at the start of the presentation, there have been several instances of even judges, but also many lawyers using AI to create and submit documents. But as a former 8th grade teacher and with a lot of friends as professors at different schools, this issue is very prevalent in schools. So they've sort of had to be a bit more ahead of the curve. Now, the thing is, it's going to, I think, become more and more relevant in the legal field as well. So we're going to have to create different policies like the ones here. But I'll turn it over to Tom for law school.
Thank you, Michael. So as Michael mentioned, it's one thing to talk about this at the undergraduate level, but now we're going to take a look at just what law schools have been doing. It would be very easy for law schools to simply say to students, don't use this technology. If you use it and you're caught, there will be serious consequences. They are saying that to an extent, but they are not putting a blanket prohibition on them. Michael has generously provided part of what Suffolk Law School has offered on the matter. And it's a very frank discussion of what generative AI can do, what its risks are, what its utilities are, and how students ought to proceed. And to an extent, it mirrors what undergraduate institutions have decided on the matter. If you're going to use it, you're going to cite it. If you don't, there will be serious disciplinary consequences. But what law schools have really taken to doing, I've seen this at Boston College, Michael has seen it as, excuse me, at Suffolk. Law practice courses have really begun to integrate AI tools into their second semester curriculum. And the second semester curriculum is really a crucial part of this, and I'll explain why. The first semester of law school is very much dedicated to learning the basics of legal research and writing, and the ability of students to competently produce research memos, persuasive writing, and writing skills in that vein. The second semester is where, and this is partially, I should add, because co-counsel and protege are extremely new. They did not exist at the beginning of my second semester at Boston College, nor Michael's. They were rolled out very early in that semester, and it left legal practice and legal writing professors sort of scrambling to figure out how to integrate them into what they want to teach students. And the way that they've generally done this is by taking assignments, short basic research assignments that were part of the first semester curriculum, and looking at them through the lens of AI. Now, what does that mean? It essentially means telling students to dive in and use these legal research and legal drafting tools provided by Thomson Reuters and by Lexis, and to see how they perform compared to the research that the students did themselves in the previous semester. And I think it's important to make that distinction there. These platforms include research tools and drafting tools. We mostly looked at the drafting tools in the course of this exercise when it came to co-counsel and protege. In my experience, and I think Michael will agree with me on this, the research tools are incredibly polished and very sophisticated. They really can cut down on the time that students take to conduct basic research on a simple prompt, one that a partner might hand down. This client is concerned about their liability in this issue. What is the case law on the matter? The legal research AI is incredibly sophisticated. It does not hallucinate cases, and it will generally get you to the right answer. It's quite impressive. The drafting tools, as we have seen, don't always measure up. And partially the reason that we found that ChatGPT seems to have a bit more polish on their drafted documents is because more people use them. AI tends to include machine learning in its tools. ChatGPT has been publicly available for almost 3 years. Co-counsel and protege are very new. We have no idea just how sophisticated they might be 3 years from now, as ChatGPT is compared to its launch to the public. It's really compelling stuff. As of right now, the drafting tools aren't where we might like them to be, but the research tools certainly are. And finally, the last component of AI education when it comes to law practice is having students grade the experience and talk about what they were comfortable with, what they were uncomfortable with, what they think the AI could be useful for, and what it really isn't ready for. I personally found that the drafting tools were not something that I would submit to a partner in a million years. But as I said, who knows where we'll be even a few months from now. So if we can move on to the next slide. Yeah, and this is, once again, another a sample of an assignment that Michael has provided from Suffolk. Using these AI-assisted tools to look at a prompt through a specific lens, and most crucially, to take a look at what the product that the AI generates is, and see how it measures up. That is the crux of what law students are being taught. We can move on to the next slide. I'll turn this over to Judge Bailey.
Okay, and we'll have time for some questions. John, if questions are submitted, are you getting some? Great. Okay, so hopefully we'll have a couple of minutes. I'm going to be very quick on this then. I thought it was important, given that we had a number of judges attending, some in person, some remotely, to talk about judicial ethics and how they're implicated. The three very important things to consider for a judge are, first, that we're talking about machines here, right? And so you cannot delegate decision-making process as a judge, and really as a lawyer, certainly, but certainly a judge can't. In fact, that's the core of the job. And I use the example of the autonomous driving vehicles, which make a decision about going around that pothole, right? Well, this is it's very similar to what happens if you're using an AI platform to help you decide a case, or in fact to decide the case. The second thing is that machine generated decisions are a black box. They don't give you any reasoning. You can ask the next question, and you might have to ask several questions to understand how it is that app came up with the decision that it made. But that's not going to be readily apparent, and reasoning is obviously critical to any judicial service. And finally, they're biased. Remember, it's all about the amount of data on which that platform is training, right? And so it will look at the largest number of elements in that platform to decide, what a person might look like, whether a person should be believed, whether, so these kinds of that historical data is going to be biased. So the platform is going to be biased. Okay, next. I looked at obviously there are 50 separate codes of conduct, one for each state. And so I looked at federal, which is pretty similar, and the ABA has generated its proposed form of conduct for U.S. judges. And they all are very similar. So right now, there's nothing specifically. I think the judicial, the entities that are regulating judicial conduct are looking at this similarly, I think, to the way schools are looking at it. It would be the wrong thing to say, no, you can't use this at all. Don't ever touch it, because next year that's probably going to change. So it might just be a tool. That's not to say that some states aren't much closer to that than use it whenever you like. Okay, so, but there's nothing in the federal codes of conduct that say you can't use it. Go ahead. I put this in just for some background information. The Federal Judicial Center itself, all findable easily by Google. So I'll move on from there. That's just some guidance. All right, I looked at a couple of the canons, and this is how I think they're implicated. Canon 1, Federal Rules of Codes of Judicial Conduct, upholding the integrity and independence of the court, of the judiciary. So judges are supposed to act independently. If by using an AI platform, are you acting independently? That's a tough question in a way, right? Because you're sitting there with your law clerk, and your law clerk is observing. Many of my law clerks weren't afraid to tell me, Judge, I think that person lied, right? They weren't afraid to say that. But I would have to exercise my independent judgment, and notwithstanding hearing that because it's my judgment that is the one that has to matter here, not input from a law clerk. Is that influential? It could be. So the concern here is over-reliance on AI or failure to understand how the AI produced a recommendation could undermine judicial independence. Next. Canon 2, avoiding impropriety and the appearance of impropriety. if the public ever gets the notion that it's a machine that's making these decisions, right? Or even unduly influencing the judicial process, we're really starting to head down into a problematic area. Next. Performing the duties of the office fairly, impartially, and diligently. Diligence, I wonder about, that's for sure, because it sure is easy to get that software program to generate an opinion, and it might look pretty good. I'm frankly amazed at how few examples we know where judges, have it's come out, that a judge probably used AI to generate an opinion, or we know used AI. We identified two. This is not something that yet really is prominent. One of my colleagues at the Judicial Division of the ABA, Judge Dixon, who really studies technology, is awake at night worrying about this very issue. It's just certain, that more and more AI will be influencing judicial opinions and will find their way into them. So like we tell everybody else, the bottom line here: AI generated content, got to check it, got to verify it. All right, the next one. Okay, and confidentiality, maybe one of the scariest parts. Remember, this is for lawyers. It's also for judges. You ask that prompt to ChatGPT, it is not confidential. The fact that Frank Bailey in Boston asked ChatGPT, put in a bunch of facts, is seeable by others, right? And so if I, as a lawyer, it's maybe even scarier, right? So we used the example, I think, last year, but if that dispute between Pioneer and Mr. LaLiberte, when he goes off and violates his non-compete, if I were to put all those facts in to ChatGPT and ask it to generate a complaint or some other platform, then anybody can see, including maybe his new employer and him, can detect that I'm asking that question. Hence, they know, gee, maybe I'm going to get sued. Or what are they really thinking about this? It's not confidential. Maybe even more important for judges, right? So whatever you put in there is not automatically confidential, and that's a real concern. Next. So that really is what we wanted to say today, but I wanted to save a little time, and we have just a few minutes. First, anybody in the room that has Judge? Yes, Paul
I
Wilson.
hear from our Irish friend that on the other side of the pond, there's the authorities are being, educational authorities are checking for things made up by AI. And if you say if one is spotted, there's going to be a chat with the disciplinary board. But if the the AI checkers are so bad, as you demonstrated earlier today, how aren't people going to be in trouble for not having used ChatGPT or whatever when it looks like maybe when some device says maybe they did?
It's a really good question. So the platform that's used in the whole EU is called Turnitin. It's not what's here. It's a plagiarism checker first and foremost. And then secondly, it's an AI detector. So what it will do is it will take your whole document and it will flag the sentences down in a line. And it will say, we found this somewhere else. We found that somewhere else. So you can be flagged for incorrect citation. You can be flagged for copying someone's entire work, even your colleagues, because it keeps a database of everything that's ever been submitted. One of my friends got flagged because she was accused of plagiarizing an essay she wrote herself in high school, which is really funny because she went into the university in Ireland and they said, you copied this student in Singapore 3 years ago. And she was like, that was me. But yeah, they do it. It's a much more sophisticated software than these ones, because it's not just generated for AI. It's academic for all forms of plagiarism.
As a judge,
But
I'm
it's possible.
horrified to hear that plagiarism is being spotted, because Judge Bailey can tell you we plagiarize ourselves all the time.
But you're given the opportunity to defend yourself. So if you're flagged to a certain degree, you basically have a meeting with academic integrity and with your professor, and they say, well, where did you get this from? And if you can answer that question, and if you can show you did your research, they waive it. But it's taken very seriously if you can't.
Also, I might add, it seems like you're asking a bit about false positives in a way.
Right.
Most of the detectors that we checked flagged the 100% human written documents as correctly 100% human. So while the detectors are not necessarily great at detecting AI documents, they all do a pretty good job of figuring out human writing, at least when it comes to legal writing, which we checked for. So it hasn't been as much of an issue as
At least I'd add the top two detectors that we use for the fake case. Those two correctly, completely identified the human written documents as human written.
right. So while false positives may exist, they're not nearly as big of an issue as the actual existence of the generative AI.
Anyone else in the room?
Yeah, I was
Yes.
just gonna say that I think it's kind of it's certainly a slippery slope because I can't see judges not availing themselves of some of these tools. For example, run this brief through some analysis and determine whether they're really citing these any of these cases been overruled, number one. Are they citing dicta? Number two, is it really not stand for that proposition? Number three, that would be really valuable
Site check.
information. Yeah, basically, but a really quick analysis. You just throw it in there and it spits it out. And then same thing for, well, why not? I'm leaning this direction. Just write me a draft. So, it really is very simple. And then you say, oh my gosh, this is really down the road I was going anyway. And it's a great place to
Hence the
start.
slippery slope.
And then you say, oh my gosh, I'm really overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, I don't have a lot of help here. It's good enough.
You worry, that's for sure. Yeah.
It's important to emphasize that it's not all bad. Exactly what you're saying. These tools are very useful if you use them in the right way. The research tools, very useful. Even the drafting tools, outlining tools, for example, are all very helpful. You just need to be able to use them the right way. And the trouble comes when someone, as you said, gets overwhelmed and decides, I'm not going to check it, it's good enough. So we need to be diligent with that.
I want to ask Todd, I want to ask you a question. Todd is at Greater Boston Legal Services. He's dealing with, underrepresented people all the time. Sometimes has to send people out the door because they're not eligible, but they surely need a lawyer. Does AI level the playing field? I think Jenna might have said that earlier. Is that fair?
I would say that it doesn't quite level the playing field, but I think that it is clear that it's going to give people a better shot than they otherwise would, because, like, for example, the stands for complaint. People are getting thrown out all the time because their complaints are just not good enough. And it's a good way to kick out the plaintiff. It's like, I can get rid of this one, I get rid of this one, I get rid of this one. It's a good way. I'll just put motion to dismiss and the judge says not good enough, and they don't know what they're doing. So I think in a lot of ways it will help people, or even overcoming a motion for summary judgment, motion to dismiss, and just like what are the basics that they would be clueless about.
So we are at 1 o'clock. I know it's not your fault. As always, I think we needed more time. I don't think we can take any more questions. I want to let people.
I have one that came in via email with time for it.
Let's go ahead. We'll hear.
So I'll use my big kid voice. One of the questions that came up here is, and it was hinted at, obviously we used Ireland as an example. To what extent are other countries looking at this issue too, and how prevalent is it overseas? Is this a specifically American issue, or is this something that other countries are encountering as well and thinking about?
I suspect that Jenna might be most helpful in this regard. I do think the EU is looking very carefully at it, but
I can tell you about Ireland and the UK and the EU. So first of all, obviously Ireland and the UK are both common law jurisdictions. So in this particular context, as we've discussed it for the States, they're probably most similar. It hasn't massively come in front of the courts in Ireland. There's 2 cases I know of where barristers, our version of an attorney, have presented cases with ghost sites. We have had an issue with lay litigants, which you guys call a different name. Sorry.
Pro se.
Yes. Lay litigants, it's common that they will be presented in front of the court, as we just discussed in your question, Judge Bailey. And when it is used in a combination of, they'll give you the form and you can maybe use a bit of critical analysis and get rid of the basic errors. That's a topic of conversation, and a big topic of conversation at the moment in the UK and Ireland about AI is we have law firms who have their own AI intake procedure. So they're answering basic client questions and queries for like the first degree of vetting via AI, and whether or not that could potentially in the future, as that develops, arise an issue of privilege and confidential legal privilege. So that's a big thing. And then just to speak to the EU, which Judge Bailey mentioned, the law in the EU is completely different. It's not adversary or in front of a court in the same way as here. But a big issue in the EU is they generate a massive amount of documents, and they have to generate it in each language of the EU when they do that. So there is a lot of rules about the use of AI for doing that, because you can't really go around and have someone decide not to actually translate the ruling of the criminal courts to French, and they just stick it into AI and get them to do it instead. So I can only answer for those jurisdictions.
So again, I think we're just a little over. It's not, you know, I had one instance, and this would be sort of like the dark ages, almost 10 years ago, where someone was photoshopping orders of mine and changing one order to something they preferred. Shocking, really. And it had my signature, and that was Photoshop, which looks like, you know, it was written in stone or something, right? Compared to what happens today. I mean, these guys generated, you know, fake immigration documents, dare I say, right? And which look pretty believable to me. So the world is changing very quickly and getting very sophisticated. I want to thank Sharon and Lodgen, you know, for hosting us today. It's a lovely room in their new space over here at One Lincoln. So I thank the partners for hosting us today. And we will be, John, we recorded this event. So this will be up on our website. If anyone wants to listen to it or parts of it again, the documents, the slideshow, all of that will be up and available on our website. But most of all, I want to thank my very talented interns from PNELF this summer. Thank you guys so much for your work.